Hello everyone and welcome back to the Football Forecast. In today's video I'm going to be reviewing Juventus versus Dortmund, and this wasn't the planned video. I was even going to do Bilbao, Arsenal or potentially Tottenham Villarreal, but after seeing this game I've watched it back and I feel like this is the game I have to do because it is quite an incredible game to talk about, and there are so many key moments and unbelievable moments that you just don't expect in every game of football. And if you do enjoy this video, please subscribe, especially if you're interested in Champions League content, because there'll be more coming out in the next couple of days, and turn those notifications on so you can click the video as soon as you see it. Anyway, let's get started in the review. So I'm going to start by looking at the first half where 0 goals were scored, because this was sort of more what I think a lot of people expected from this match. Juventus were going to try and keep it tight, and they were going to very much play on the counter and try create what they can and very much play sort of a conservative way, which you sort of expect under Tudor, the Juventus coach. But how it sort of played out in this first half, Juventus had majority of the chances and Dortmund couldn't really get a foot in this game. Juventus could have gone 1-0 up maybe. They had a couple of decent shots from distance, but they never really threatened, and I very much thought this is what was going to be sort of the game. I thought Juventus were going to be very conservative and it was going to require Dortmund to get on the front foot and try win the game, because Juventus are a more defensive side, and you would say Dortmund are the attacking side under Niko Kovac, who's always been an attacking manager. So for the first half we barely saw any chances happen, and somehow in a 4-4 game, quite unbelievable really that all goals came in the second half. As I said, this is the second half stats, and for me it was always going to have to be Dortmund who are going to have to find that first goal, because they were always the team that were more likely to attack even though they're away from home. How Niko Kovac likes to play is generally on the counter attack, and his sort of approach is very much all about getting players forward, and that's sort of what we saw today. Kovac sort of changed the game a bit, and all of a sudden Dortmund did become a more attacking side, and this forced Juventus to respond, and this is why for me we got such a way more like sort of exciting second half compared to the first one, because Niko Kovac and Dortmund managed to start getting that attacking intent, and Juventus had to eventually follow. They eventually couldn't just try to play for sort of maybe a 1-0 or maybe at least guarantee a point from this game. Juventus had to start scoring goals, and this is why the game became such a mental Champions League game. And I do think when Champions League games sort of get this sort of back to forth nature, you do just get these high scoring games, and Juventus have the ability to score. They just have a more defensive approach, as we've seen in the past. Look, on the weekend they won 4-3 against Inter, and that's because they were continuously having to respond, and then they eventually got the goal. Juventus and Inter just went back and forth. So Juventus have the potential to do this sort of games. We've seen this, but they can struggle at points, and they would rather be a bit more conservative. But I think recently we have seen that Juventus, if they need to, they can score 3 or 4 goals. So here are the key moments in the game, and as I just said, as soon as Adeyemi scored this goal in the 52nd minute, it really did unlock this game. As you can see from sort of this momentum chart, I'm not a big believer in these sort of graphs, but I think in this game and some games they do show it. So you can see this Dortmund momentum, that is actually what was happening in this game if you watched it. And then immediately back, Juventus did finally get that goal through Kenan Yildiz, which was a brilliant finish, and I am starting to see the sort of Yildiz effect. I was personally I don't watch enough probably Juventus, I watch more English football, and I don't really get to see sort of Yildiz in action on a week by week basis, but I've heard he's a real talent, and I could see this game from what I saw. He played very well, Kenan Yildiz, and I can sort of see the argument that people are making is like, why would you sign Garnacho and Barra-Gittins? The example I always gave was Rodrigo or maybe a Barcola, but maybe Yildiz was the answer. Maybe you should have paid 80-90 million for him, because that's what he was sort of rumoured to be as a fee, and I actually think that was probably quite a reasonable fee after sort of seeing him in action for Turkey at points, but also now more with Juventus. And I think that would have been a better use of money for a lot of those top clubs if they were looking for a winger. So he scored obviously a brilliant goal. What I'm going to do now is just highlight the 2 Juventus goals they scored. So first of all, the goal from Felix Nmecha, which was a very good finish. But what I'm sort of going to highlight about this is the mistake from Khéphren Thuram. I think Khéphren Thuram could have easily laid in a challenge. He could have definitely nicked the ball off Adeyemi before he played it into Nmecha. And in my opinion, he should have just let him go past, and he wasn't thinking about this. And it basically just gave Nmecha an open finish, which was a great finish. Don't get me wrong, from outside the box. But in my opinion, the move should have been stopped earlier from Thuram. And the goal from Jan Kutu is also a mistake from Kefren Thuram. Kefren Thuram wins the ball back in midfield after basically the Dortmund player just trotted over the ball and couldn't control it. And then Kefren Thuram tries to dribble out of his sort of area and doesn't sort of look for the pass. He sort of just tries to get himself out of the area. I understand Thuram's very good at this. He's a midfielder and this is sort of part of his strengths. But I just can't quite understand this. Dribbling around the ball in your own box just outside your own box makes no sense. And then the ball just sort of falls for Jan Kutu. And it's a decent finish from Jan Kutu. But really, Di Gregorio, the Juventus keeper, has to be saving this. It's in the near post, and like 9 times out of 10 you would expect your keeper to save this. So that's 2 errors for the Dortmund third goal, and that sort of put Juventus back on the back foot. So the 4th goal was for Bensebaini, and it was from the penalty spot. Yes, I do think this is a penalty. He's clearly just got his hand in the way trying to block the shot. But yes, that is 100% a penalty, and it was well converted. And at this point, we really thought that was the game. It'd been a great game up to this point, but we really thought that was Dortmund's game and they had won it. But before I sort of look at that, I'm just going to quickly highlight the Dušan Vlahović goal, which he scored here to make it 2-2. Sort of just a lot of space in behind, and that's sort of what we saw in the game. It started to become a lot more open after it previously being a very sort of tight game with no sides having chances in the counter-attack, and it was a good finish by Dušan Vlahović. And then this is the other thing I'd like to highlight is Dušan Vlahović's impact for Juventus in this game, but also this season. Dušan Vlahović in general for Juventus has been like a real flop, like really like a shit signing in general. After being at such demand, I remember Arsenal and Spurs were hovering around the player for 60 million. It looked like a really decent deal, but he's really struggled at Juventus. But under Igor Tudor this season, he's actually been very good off the bench. In general, he's played well off the bench, scored a couple of goals in a cup and in some games, and looked like a very decent player. But when he started on the weekend against Inter, he didn't look like that level, and he eventually got dragged. So I think we're starting to see what maybe Vlahović can value at Juventus. Obviously, it's not worth the 60 million price tag, but a very good player when there's a bit more space in behind, when the game gets a bit more sort of, when the game's a bit more about counter-attacking and sort of playing on the break. That's when Vlahović looks at his best. He obviously got the 3rd goal for Juventus, which felt like a consolation, and it was a ball won by Kalulu, and that was also off another mistake, this time from Dortmund. And that's sort of what I felt like this game was. I felt there were too many mistakes. And then the final goal from Juventus was a ball in from Dušan Vlahović into Lloyd Kelly. And this goal really felt just a goal that had come from the momentum of the 3rd one. All of a sudden, there was a bit of belief in the Allianz Stadium, and they did manage to find that goal to get the 4-4 draw. And it was a very good delivery from Dušan Vlahović. And this is what I'm talking about. He really had an impact in this game, and the Lloyd Kelly header is very good. It was very close to being offside. Thankfully, for that moment, it was onside. And I just sort of wish with these sort of moments, you're always questioning it. You're always thinking, oh no, have I just celebrated too early? This is the problem with VAR. And it also did take a while for them to finally come to that decision, a couple of minutes. But it was very tight, in fairness. But anyway, Juventus managed to get that goal to make it a 4-4 draw, and I think Juventus will take that considering how they got to the 4-4 draw. And I'm pretty sure Dortmund will be pretty disappointed, and that will very much feel like a loss for them. So that is the end of this video between Juventus and Dortmund. Please let me know your thoughts on this game, and I think everyone can agree this is what the Champions League is all about. These sort of games, these games that you don't expect to end in these sort of results. Because Juventus are more of a defensive side, even though they won 4-3 in the weekend. I don't think a lot of people saw this sort of score coming. They definitely didn't see it when Dortmund were 4-2 up in the 93rd minute, but Juventus found a way back into this game. Please let me know your thoughts. If you enjoy the video, please like and subscribe, because there's going to be loads of Champions League content coming out. And also there's going to be loads of Premier League content coming out for this weekend, including some championship stuff. I'm just going to do sort of the football that I think is important to talk about, but I'm also going to include those lower clubs if you are interested in that football as well.